This video will explain how to assemble your mini-rig. The mini-rig comes in a broken down state. You will have received 3 boxes with your order. Each box holds components for the build, so let's get started. Box 1 contains the frame and brake assembly. Remove it from the box and remove the protective packaging. Repeat this for box 2 and box 3. Box 2 contains the forks, headset, cranks and sprocket. Box 3 contains the wheels, bars and chain. Check that you've received all the components in your boxes and make sure all of them are within reach. Attached to the frame is a plastic bag containing all the tools you'll need for the build. These are a 15mm socket or spanner, 19mm socket or spanner, 1.5, 4, 5 and 6mm Allen keys. You may also need a set of pliers to help put on the chain. Start by undoing the compression bolt from the forks. Note the order that the bearings are assembled on the steerer tube, as these are in the correct order that you will need to install them into the frame. Remove everything but the bottom bearing. Slide the steerer tube through the head tube of the frame, then reassemble the bearings, dust cover and spacer. Do not reinstall the top cap before installing the stem. Next, slide the stem onto your steerer tube, reinstall the top cap and tighten down to compress the headset. Be sure not to over-tighten the top cap compression bolt, as this may damage the bearings. The headset compression cap should be tight enough as to not have any play or wobble. Undo the stem faceplate using a 4mm Allen key. Insert your bars and refit the stem faceplate. Do up the bolts using a cross formation, making sure the gap at the top and the bottom of the faceplate to the body of the stem is even. Loosely do up the pinch bolts at the rear of the stem to stop it from moving. You don't need to tighten them fully right now, as we will come back to align and tighten them later. Now mount your seat onto the seat post, adjust to your desired angle and tighten the seat post bolt using a 6mm Allen key. Undo the quick release clamp using the lever that is on the frame. Insert the post and do up the clamp so that the seat does not move. We can now flip the bike over to install the other components. Undo the nut on the front wheel and put it into the forks. Tighten the nut using a 15mm ratchet, making sure that the retaining washers are situated correctly and that the wheel is straight. Repeat this for the rear wheel, being careful to ensure that the wheel is fully located in the rear dropout and that the disc is sitting correctly between the brake pads. Now we can move on to installing the cranks. All the spacers and the top hat washer that are needed are on the crank axle. Let's remove the right hand arm so that we can install the sprocket. Do so by undoing the axle bolt and pull off the crank arm. Remove the sprocket bolt from the arm, line up the sprocket on the crank arm, reinsert the bolt and tighten. Add 2 of the 5mm spacers and the larger cone spacer to the axle and slide it down to meet the crank arm. Now slide the axle through the bottom bracket from the non-drive side and add the remaining cone washer and spacer to the axle. Locate your top hat washer for the sprocket and add the small 1mm spacer to it. Put this into the back of your sprocket and slide the crank arm onto the axle. Now fully tighten the sprocket bolt. Replace the axle bolts and tighten down both sides evenly. Now tighten the crank arm pinch bolts. Feed the chain around the rear wheel, through the frame and around the sprocket. Join the 2 female ends of the chain using the master link. Put the faceplate on and lock into place using the clip. You may need to use your pair of pliers to do this. Double check that your chain is sitting on the driver, sprocket and chain tensioner correctly. Flip the bike back over onto its wheels and we can now install the brake lever. The brake lever is hinged, so there's no need to remove the grips from the bars. Undo the bolt in the back of the lever. Open the hinge and wrap it around the bars on your desired side. Replace the bolt and tighten. Make sure the lever is in a comfortable position for you. Loosen the pinch bolts at the rear of the stem. Line up your bars with the forks and front wheel, and then retighten the pinch bolts for the final time. Your brake may need adjusting for best performance. To do this, insert a long 5mm Allen key through the rear wheel and into the back side of the brake assembly. Tighten the stationary inside pad of the brake assembly until it is touching the disc. Now loosen the caliper bolts, pull the brake lever and retighten whilst keeping the brake lever depressed. Release the brake lever and loosen off the stationary inside pad so there's a 0.5mm gap between the pad and the rim, allowing the wheel to spin freely. Small brake adjustments can be made at the caliper and lever by using the barrel adjusters. Ensure the two 1.5mm grub screws are tight on the rear wheel disc carrier. Give one final check over the whole bike to ensure all bolts are tight. Pump your tyres up to 30 psi and you're ready to shred.